Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Hey, the Outdated Wrestling Hour has a new co-host. Let me introduce him. Oh, I know this guy. Bob, hand me the paper. Let's see. Wow. Here's the co-host, Joe Piscopo.
I'm Joe Puccio.
No, let me get my bifocals. Here's your co-host, Joe Pesci.
I'm Joe Puccio.
Oh. Here's your co-host, Topo Gigio.
I'm Joe Puccio.
Here's your co-host, Joe Bessa.
I'm Joe Puccio.
Ah. It's Joe Puccio, the new co-host of the Outdated Wrestling Hour. Bob, right little Nita, you sniveling young punk! Hey, this is Bob Smith. We'll get this shindig started in earnest right after this quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. We got a new co-host you're going to want to meet. Hang on, man. Hang on. Well, I reckon it's time to do a little bit of an update for the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Let's see what shows you can enjoy several times every week. They've got a veritable cornucopia of wrestling podcasts, so let's dig into it. Pretty much the flagship of WrestleCopia is the Wrestling Memory Grenade. Join host Ray Russell as he analyzes and discusses years of wrestling history from your favorite promotions. From Hulkamania to Mulkymania, from the Midnight Express to the Lex Express, they've got it all. Tune in and get a big piece of history on the Wrestling Memory Grenade. If you like nostalgia, this one's for you. The Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. What a legend Bob Roop is, and he welcomes you to the Wrestling Stoop as he shares stories, historical moments, and all kinds of memories from his 20-plus year career as a wrestler and booker. And you know he got wild near the end of his career. Find out all of it on the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop. One of the most unique wrestling podcasts anywhere is DG's Puro Wrestling Academy. Join host Dan as he travels back in time to discuss the history of pro wrestling in Japan. He's spent decades studying the world of Japanese pro wrestling. Now he offers up his historian-level knowledge to you. You'll learn something on every single show, I guarantee it. That's DG's Puro Wrestling Academy. The great Gene Jackson hosts the Retro Wrestling Review. That's RE-View. Brings in a variety of co-hosts and wrestling legends to the program as he goes back in time to watch and review pro wrestling from years goes by. Get the breakdown here at never-before-heard stories, and feel free to watch along with them. It's worth it, let me tell you, especially if you're a USWA fan. Enjoy the Retro Wrestling Review. When this show started not all that long ago, it was called Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert. Now it's Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich, two of the great stars from Memphis and beyond. You'll learn all about them, hear great old school stories, stuff you've never heard before, definitely on Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich. One of my personal favorite podcasts out there is Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty, a meat and potatoes name for a anything but a meat and potatoes show. Join him as he reminisces about pro wrestling history with a variety of legendary guests and topics. And what I like about him, he knows everything about Dick the Bruiser, Bruiser Bedlam, and the WWA. But that's only part of what you'll hear on Wrestling Nostalgia with Dave Dynasty. It was the WWF versus WCW, Raw versus Nitro, the Monday Night War, the Ratings War, the NWO, the Attitude Era. Now, there's a podcast all about it. It's called Monday Warfare, Raw versus Nitro. They break it down with episode reviews, you name it. If you want to know all about that classic ratings war, listen to Monday Warfare Raw versus Nitro. One of the most unique podcasts you'll hear anywhere is the Other Ship podcast. It's a pop culture contest with a pro wrestling lean. Join a rotating group of co-hosts as they talk movies, sports, music, TV, food, and of course, pro wrestling. They take on various topics in roundtable discussions, special guest interviews, and other content concepts. As they say, laugh your ass off on this voyage aboard the Other Ship. New episodes are in the bag for the Captain's Corner pod. Join Captain Nick as he presents the Captain's Corner podcast. It features old school wrestling interviews and discussions, plus all the latest goings on in the world of the Captain's adventures. Nothing else quite like the Captain's Corner pod. Also on the WrestleCopia network, the Glory Days GrappleCon cast. Hosts Barry and Captain Nick present the Glory Days GrappleCon podcast featuring memories and special interviews with wrestling stars of the past and even those of today. There's even more at WrestleCopia, a podcast called TR Shocks the World, the WCNN News, and the Power Hour. It's quite a lineup with more new podcasts joining all the time. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. How do you get involved? It's pretty easy. Go to their constantly updated website, WrestleCopia.com. Click a few buttons and take a voyage into wrestling's past, present, and future. Get it all at WrestleCopia. Hello and welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. I am your host, Bob Smith. There's a change in the air. Yes, there is, folks. This, as we have hyped for a couple weeks now, we have a co-host. I'm just going to bring him on. It's Joe Puccio. You all know him. Hello, Joe.
Hey, Bob. Hello. How are you? And thanks so much for inviting me on with this new role.
Oh, my pleasure. You kidding me? This is going to be a lot of fun. And that's the reason I'm bringing you on. Your job that you have done on both the wrestling podcast and the Outdated Entertainment Hour has been absolutely stellar. We have done some great shows. I actually held over the Rock and Roll Replacements for a third week. That's how much I like that show. I can't believe the amount of people going, I didn't know this and I didn't know that. So we did a good job on that show, I think. I think that, we brought up a topic that really doesn't get broached a lot. And that's what I'm trying to be. I'm trying to be different with the wrestling show, different with the entertainment show. And you have a history with both things. So I want to give you the floor for a minute or two. Tell us about your wrestling writing background, because a lot of people may not know that. They may not have followed you from the first year when you appeared. And then talk about your entertainment website, which is really cool. And I think more people need to look at it. So the floor is yours, Joe.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and before I move to that, I'll just say I did not know you were going to keep the Replacements rock and roll episode for a third week. So that's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. I had a lot of fun doing that one as well. Like
yeah, that was really good.
It was so much fun.
We could follow that up. I mean,
absolutely.
There's so many people out there. We could easily. The Jeff Jones thing with Rush had a lot of people. I was talking to a really nice guy on Facebook, and I can't think of his name right now. I'm sorry, but he said I didn't know that. He knew about the drummer. He didn't know about Jeff Jones, the bass player. And I don't think most people know about that. So being that I am not the biggest Rush fan, although I do admire them greatly, to know that when other people didn't, well, you know how I knew it? I saw Burton Cummings' concert, and he introduced him. I'll bet you guys didn't know that this is the original bass player in Rush, and the whole crowd went, whoa. So it's like, it's one of those best kept secrets, I guess. And the guy Jeff Jones is a really talented player. I better shut up. We're in the wrestling show now at the end.
No, you're right though. It is, and I had the same experience. I had a friend that after it came out, he listened and he said the same thing to me. He had no idea. So it's cool when you could scoop people like that. I was scooped as well on that pod for a few of these names we brought up, or that you brought up. But I'll just give a brief rundown of some of my wrestling writing in the past. I did write for the Wrestling Observer website. Now, this was going back, I want to say, 12, 15 years ago or something like that, when WWE had the ECW expansion. They had their own ECW brand. I was the weekly writer for that, so I'd watch the shows, I'd recap them, I'd basically right after the show was over, I would do a live a recap on the site. That went on for a while that show was still on the air. Did some contributions for Dave over the years for different things like that. Wade Keller on the Pro Wrestling Torch years ago, he had a sister publication that I also did a few features for, which was also really, really cool to get involved, being that, I always felt Dave and Wade were two of the originals.
But you know what? We just had Brian Solomon on the previous show.
Yes.
And,
yeah.
which was a really great show. Brian is just natural with this stuff. And we talked about Dave, and I continue to insist, do not conflate Dave Meltzer, the journalist, to Dave Meltzer, who gives the star ratings. One is an opinion. The other is straight news. Nobody has been more effective at reporting wrestling news than Dave Meltzer in the history of this business. End of story. I don't care what anybody says.
100%. Bob, you'll never get an argument from me about Meltzer. It's weird because we're in sort of a period now, I'd say in the last maybe 5 years or so, that he has so many detractors, and it's really strange. Like, I don't really know where that started because it wasn't always like that.
It just goes part and parcel with the WWE versus AEW social media war, which is really what it is. Now, look, I'm not a big AEW fan, right? But I don't want to go around picking on AEW, although, some people kind of lambasted me just this past week because I made fun of Will Ospreay. Taking on I guess he was on a Jericho cruise. Was that what has happened, where he beat up a Triple H lookalike?
I don't know. Yeah, he was on the Jericho cruise, but
I'm assuming that's where that happened. I just thought it was below somebody who's like at a supposedly superstar level. It's too indie. So I said you should be doing it. And I also said, well, this was the inflammatory part. I think Ospreay is the charisma of a plastic spoon, but that's just my opinion. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people like him. They like that flippy style. They like the 20-minute matches with 46 pin attempts. With me, listen, I cannot put down his athletic ability, not for a second.
Mm-hmm.
He's an exceptional athlete. I think you're going to hurt somebody. And that bothers me. When Ospreay, of everybody in the business right now, is really key because he is that bridge between working a match and taking those unnecessary risks that I think are going to lead to injury. I'm sorry. I'm an old pacifist. I don't want anybody to get hurt.
Yeah.
When you have to question, oh God, is he all right? Every single Ospreay about either him or his opponent. That's too much for me. I don't like it. It doesn't entertain me. And it spooks me and I don't like it. I'm sorry. I just don't.
I mean, it's a fair point. If you're talking about Will Ospreay specifically, I mean, I definitely am a huge Ospreay fan. I think I think there's a fine line between his matches. I really don't consider him one of the, quote unquote flippy guys or whatever. I mean, yes, he does a ridiculous amount of athletic moves that are just, they defy, they defy gravity. You can't even believe how he's doing some of this stuff. But I mean, obviously that's the business we're in now. I mean, they're pretty much all of the guys are trying to outdo each other. And you see that on a daily basis when you're watching wrestling. But I mean, at the same time, I feel like you did have that over the years as well. I mean, you look at somebody, I mean, it's a different level, but look at somebody like Mick Foley. Mm-hmm. I mean, while he wasn't that type of acrobatic wrestler, obviously, he still did a lot of really nutty things in his day, from the elbow off the apron onto the concrete floor. And I mean, we can talk about the Hell in a Cell match, but that was just one match. I completely get that. But you know what I mean? Like, so he did the same thing. It's just to a different level,
Well, here's the deal with Mick. Mick was fighting. And I'm telling you, my magazines were guilty of this as anybody, the PWI family magazines, in that it was muscle era. It was the steroid era. Everybody looked like a Greek god for a while.
Yeah.
Everybody looked like Hercules or Hogan, or go down the list of all the, Paul Orndorff, all these bodies beautiful. And everybody looked at Foley and go, meh, he's got a big ass.
Yeah.
He's got a big ass. He's just big, but he's not muscular. He's not cut. He doesn't have that juiced up look. Yeah. And so he had to fight twice as hard to get noticed. I think in his psyche, he thought he had to do twice as much to get half as far because he
This is
didn't
true.
have the look of the era.
Right,
He'd
right.
be the first to admit it. I remember riding a car with him. We were talking about his big ass. So, remember the big ass jam in ECW later? So anyway, yeah, it's like, I think with him, first of all, he perfected that really good and exciting move that really hurt him later in his life, the elbow drop off the apron,
Right,
because he's landing on his hip. But boy, was that an exciting move.
right, right.
But I always got the sense from knowing him and talking to him that he knew how to protect himself. And I think he did that to the best of his ability. Problem is when you do it for 10, 12, 13 years, it's gonna wear, you're gonna get the wear and tear, you're gonna get the injuries. And I'll
And
tell you
I,
what, it hasn't affected his mind. Like I said, I talked to him recently. He's as sharp as a tack after all these years, and his memory's better than mine, way better than mine. So, I don't know what to say other than I've always admired him, but that's a good comeback for the Osprey thing with me. That's an excellent comeback because I had Foley in my era. You've got Osprey in yours. In a way, it's a good comparison.
yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not I'm not that far off from you. So as far as I still love the old school stuff, and I don't want to
But
give
that's
the
why
wrong
you're here,
impression.
Jackson. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm not,
Yeah.
just disregarding any of that. But I think I just, you have to kind of look at the evolution sometimes of the business, and it's also funny because you wonder. There's that age old, thing where the old timers, where they're trying to talk some sense into the young guys. And you see that all the time where guys like Foley, I'm sure, are going to tell the younger guys, you probably should ease up a little, you don't have to do that every night, save it for the pay-per-views or save it for the big shows and things like that. And I guess it's just one of those things that just happens with every generation. I mean, you look back even further, one of my favorites of all time, the Dynamite Kid. I mean, that guy was the matches that he had in the early
Mhm.
80s, late 70s, early 80s were revolutionary. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the stuff he did.
Yeah.
Look what happened with him. Poor guy ended up in a wheelchair.
Oh gosh,
Uh,
I still cannot get over the tape where he's perched on the top turnbuckle, and you kinda see him fly backwards into nothing.
yeah, yeah.
Scariest thing I ever watched. Where did he land? Where did he go? And as it turned out, I think that particular moment screwed him up really bad, and the health he was fighting health problems for years and years, and,
Oh
it's just,
yeah.
but you're right, I mean, he's way more influential, I think, than some people give him credit for. Just so many people looked up to him.
He really is influential, and just not that I had planned this, but yeah, I had just spoken with Bronwyn Billington, who's his daughter. I spoke with her a few weeks ago for a feature on my website.
Okay, so
And
there's the tie-in. Talk about your website. There's your tie-in right there. Talk about the website because you do wrestlers from now and again, as well as the coolest bunch of esoteric of any website I can think of. So hype your site and hype that interview if you'd be so kind.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, I mean, with the Bronwyn one in particular, I reached out to her simply because I know she's active on various social media platforms, and she happens to be the daughter of, like I said, one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. We struck up a conversation. She agreed to come on. So we did a nice interview, talked about obviously her dad's career and just growing up around the wrestlers, things like that. They had a pretty lengthy estrangement over the years. We kind of went into in not only that, but also we talked about her own career. She's working as a manager right now in the independents, so she's also trying to make a name for herself. And it's so funny, everything comes full circle. But when you mentioned Will Ospreay, it reminds me of her because one of the things she told me was that he's her current favorite wrestler. She was actually going on the Jericho cruise, and she was looking forward to meeting him. So that was kind of funny.
She's managing, but not wrestling.
She's not wrestling. I asked her about that, and she said she wouldn't rule it out. And she's actually in the process of training to at least take some bumps just so that she could be a little bit more physical than she is now. But as far as being a full-time wrestler, I think she pretty much knows that that's not in the cards, but at least she wants to be able to take a few bumps, not on the Bobby Heenan level, I'm sure, but, something, something pretty respectable. But
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's just that's just one aspect of the website. I mean, like you said, I like to focus on obviously the wrestlers from the 70s and 80s. I'm trying to think of the ones I did features on over the last year or so. Steve Kern, Jumpin' Jim Brunzell. I'm actually in the process right now of setting something up with perennial enhancement talent Barry Horowitz. We're
Wow.
going to talk about his book that he has out. So, it's just it's a lot of fun. Being a fan of wrestling my whole life, it's a lot of fun to be able to give these performers a platform to speak. And I also think that a lot of times, most what you're seeing today, mostly it's going to be a lot of podcasts. These performers are on, where mine is a little different, because even though we do the interviews, we don't release the interviews. It's generally just for purposes of research, writing a feature, and what a concept, an actual written article, nowadays. So we try to do that. But other than wrestling, pretty much anything entertainment based. I just did a feature on Rod Serling, Joseph Doherty, the Emmy Award winning writer on 30 something and Pretty Little Liars. He just wrote a book on Rod Serling. That was great to talk to him. So we did a deep dive into that. An actress from the new Terrifier film, which I think we spoke about during the horror movie podcast that we did.
Right.
Antonella Rose, who's been in a lot of things, Fear the Walking Dead and Terrifier 3. So it's pretty eclectic, like you said. I'm also setting something up in the future with Jeremy Miller, who I know the name probably doesn't sound familiar to most people, but he was the son on the 80s sitcom Growing Pains. So I'm going to do a feature on that. And, I think what I really try to do for the most part on the site is just to feature subjects and people that you might not see in another place. You're not going to see in so many places, whereas you're going to see a lot of the same old in most places. But I like to kind of give these people a voice, and, for people to kind of scroll through my site and say, oh yeah, I remember Ben from Growing Pains, or I remember this person,
Well, the thing I like about your site, and it's the same thing I'm trying to do with the show, and this is why I feel like kismet with you, because here's the thing. I don't want to do what everybody else does. I don't want to do the same stories. I don't want to talk about the same things. I don't want the same guests. I don't care who it is. If I know a wrestler's going to be on 20 different podcasts, I don't want him on mine.
Right.
Not in that time period, because they're going to say the same thing on 20 different podcasts because they're promoting a book or something. They're not going to listen again. If you heard a wrestler who wrote a book on 3 other podcasts and he gets around to mine last, I'm dead. All right. This is commerce, folks. I mean, you want to attract as many ears as you can on a weekly basis. And I'm not putting anybody down for booking the same people, on 20 different podcasts. It's up to them. I feel though that I want the show to be a little different. I want to interview everybody, but by the same token, I don't want to be 19th in line in a 5-week period, because that's kiss of death right there. But not only that, you're doing stuff that nobody else is doing. I mean, you did Land of the Lost a few months ago. Yeah. I mean, I used to watch that show when I was wearing short pants, and you brought back all those memories of Land of the Lost. And I'm like, I can't get this information anywhere else. And that's what I like about your website, is because that's the goods, man. It's totally original, and it's you're right. It's Generation X wire. It's you're speaking for, guys your age, people your age, men and women your age.
No, yeah, thank you. I mean, like the Land of the Lost one was great, because it was just like, a lot of this stuff for selfish reasons. I mean, this is stuff that I grew up watching, and I legitimately want to know about these people and what they're up to. So speaking to the actor and actresses from that show was a great fun for me as well. Just to find out things that I've always wanted to learn about. Little House on the Prairie, interviewing Dean Butler, who played Melissa Gilbert's husband on the show. That was great as well. He's out with a book, and we spoke about that. So it's just things like that. I try to keep it fresh. I try to keep my eye out, and just even if I'm watching an old TV show, I could be watching something on MeTV, and I'm sitting there.
You did the interview on that film. How'd you find him? How do you find these people? I mean, let's face it, they were stars many cases decades ago.
It's
you
not
you
easy.
just can't. Do you look them up on social media? Do you instant message somebody? How does it work?
It's not that easy, but I mean, the more that I've done, the more the easier it gets. You make contacts here and there. If I speak to someone, they worked with somebody else and they're able to kind of provide contact information. I'm not too shy about that. Try to be as polite as I can be, but just try to get information that way. And luckily, with Generation XY are doing fairly well. I also get stuff sent to me now. I'm on a lot of lists from publicists and things like that,
Mhm.
and I've made a few contacts in that scene. So I think all that comes together, for the most part. And like I said, I mean, it's just the more you do, I just have to keep pumping and just trying to make contacts and, hopefully it works out and hopefully, one thing leads to another and you get someone that you didn't expect to get. Another example I'll give is I'm currently speaking with Lydia Cornell, who was the daughter in Too Close for Comfort.
With Ted Knight.
With Ted Knight, the blonde daughter, in
Right.
Too Close for Comfort. We're friends on social media, just, talking about different things, things that may not even relate to entertainment, politics and things like that. And,
Mhm.
I floated the idea to her and she's definitely, receptive to that. It just has to be a matter of scheduling and things. But we're hoping to do something like that. So yeah, it's eclectic, and it's hopefully, if you look through a few of my stories and you're not, I never watched Land of the Lost. I don't really care about that. Or I never watched Little House on the Prairie, but then you might move on to something else and say, oh yeah, I used to watch Perfect Strangers and I remember this show.
Yeah.
I'll do something there.
You got enough stuff there that when you scroll down that list, people are going to find what they like. And here's the other thing. I'll just blow smoke at you one more time. I am a hard grader when it comes to writing, and you're a real writer. This is not puff pieces. It's not everybody tune in. You'll have a good time watching Joe's show. No, you look at things with a journalistic eye, and I appreciate that more than anybody out there. You're an old school. Too many of these websites read like fanzines. Yours reads like, well, news, and I like it.
I appreciate that. And that's actually something that that's just my personality that I just, before I publish something, I just always give it like 3 reads and, run it through spell check 5 times. And
Yeah.
I'm so careful with that because, it's just always been the way I am. I just feel like it has my name on it. I want it to read well. Sometimes I'll be stuck on a paragraph for an hour because I just can't think of the right thing to say. And,
Mhm.
it's a good thing to be, but at the same time, it also frustrates me
Oh, well,
because,
we'll segue now back to my PWI days in Rockville Center, New York,
yeah.
55 Maple Avenue, and I'm on the 5th floor, sitting right in smack in the center of that big office that we had in the editorial department, and I'm sitting there and I'm staring at my screen. I started in '88. I'd say this was about 90. I got writer's block so bad. I mean, just total writer's block. Because, we were creative writers more than sports writers, if you catch my drift. If Matt Brock's my middle name, something,
Right.
something was up. So I got this bout. I've never had it before or since. I was succeeding there. Everything was fine. And I got writer's, like, I couldn't write my name on the screen. And I was coming home from work and going to bed at 4:30 in the afternoon. I was like spent. I was gone. And I don't usually curse on the show, but what got me out of it? I just said, and I just wrote anything I felt like writing after that. I think that's the cure for writer's block. I knew it wasn't a choice of not writing. I had to write, and I had to write a lot. But once you take that monkey off your back, look, I'm going to do my best. If it's not good enough, so be it. Then you get calm. Then you can climb that wall, go over it, and start writing again. And I never had writer's block again. But I think it was a good solid 2 weeks. I couldn't write my name.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever gone through that?
I have. Absolutely. It happens all the time. I was actually just telling my wife today, earlier, I was saying that as of right now, I think I have about 5 or 6 interviews lined up over the next month.
Good
And
God.
I just don't, I don't want to take on too much as well, just because, of course I have my shoot job, so to speak, in life as well. And,
Mhm.
we have other responsibilities and things to do. And, it's not just doing the interviews, but it's, as doing the wrestling and the entertainment podcast. There's a lot of work. You have to edit through it. You have to transcribe when you do these interviews. You have to
Mhm.
think of an angle to write a feature. And that's one thing I always do as well before I start writing, just trying to think of like, what do I really want to say about this? I don't want to just,
Yeah.
okay, this was a great show. Like let's just talk about the show. You want to kind of lead in a bit of way that grabs you. So there's just so many things to think about. And I was looking at my schedule, and yes, I still use an old school. I've talked about this with you at times. I have a old school planner where I actually use a pen and I write my stuff in that way. I don't use my phone. But I was looking at it and I was like, wow, I have all these things and I really got to sort of take a step back and make sure I don't overwhelm myself, but absolutely it happens to me as well. There are times when I'm sitting there and I just have to step away, maybe take a couple hours, watching TV or whatever, and then just get back. And then all of a sudden it just clicks.
Man, I am so old. Do you remember the thin reporter's notebooks? It said reporter's notebook on it. It was
Yeah,
thin.
yeah.
It was like half the size of a piece of paper. So going straight down. And I learned news shorthand. And I was really good at it. And I always had accurate quotes. And if you ask me now to do that again, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
There was a certain style to doing news shorthand. And especially when interviewing wrestlers back in the day and stuff like that. I couldn't do it again. I'm afraid I'm a slave to Zoom, so to speak. The little Zoom handy quarter, because it's like I can't.
But
So
that's
I'm
cool that you
thankful. I'm
learned that.
thankful. I'm thankful for. Oh gosh, that got me through my entire news and sports
Yeah.
career. Are you kidding?
I never learned any of that. So that's really cool that you were able to do
I
that.
still have the notebooks.
Yeah.
Never threw them away. I know where they are right now in my bedroom. I have a couple of reporters' notebooks. And they're white. They're unused. And I should go interview somebody and put a hat on that says press. And go.
But
Just interview anybody. The Queens County Commissioner or something.
But I want to, I appreciate you giving me the praise about the website, but I did want to just go back to something you just mentioned a few minutes ago and give you praise. One of the things I love about both podcasts, but I'm thinking right now the wrestling one in particular, is I think my favorite shows that I listen to are the ones where it's something that I never heard or was just never announced before. The one I'm thinking of is just, I believe it was 2 episodes ago with Michael Cavaccini, I believe his name is.
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
he's doing the book on TNA. He's doing the book on the knockout division. And as I'm listening to this, I'm saying, as far as I know, there's never been a TNA book.
No, I think this is a first. I really do.
Yeah. And I'm in Barnes and Noble a lot, and I head to the wrestling section and I just take a look at any new books. I don't think I've ever seen one on TNA. And
No.
I thought that was a really cool get for guests because I didn't know Michael, and now I know him. Now I'm on the, I'm going to be on the lookout for his book, whether or not it's coming out in 5
He
years.
said 5 years. Yeah.
We might have a long wait.
I met him at a wrestling convention in Philadelphia 2 years ago, and for some reason we hit it off, and we talked probably for about a half hour, 45 minutes, just talking about stuff. Yeah, he was looking for some. I think he was looking for Bill Apter or somebody at that point. Bill happened to be there, so I said he's right over there. It's one of those deals. But
Right.
I could tell he was really sharp and really interested on a journalistic way about stuff. And to find out he's doing a book on the TNA knockouts, first of all, that's kind of like Brian Solomon saying, I'm going to do the Gorilla Monsoon book. And then everyone in the world thinks, wow, I never thought of that. What a great get that is, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So when you can find something new to write about in a clogged field of wrestling journalism, that's pretty good. And I know Mike's a bright guy and a good writer, and he's going to kick some serious ass with that book. It's going to be a real headline maker, I think. Because he says he's done 300 interviews.
I know. That's the part that got me, honestly. When he was mentioning that he spoke to everybody from, Dixie Carter and Jeff Jarrett all the way to the costume designers and the backstage people.
Mm-hmm.
And, and honestly, I'll be completely transparent here. There are some people that he mentioned that I have tried to, get in touch with over the last few years that I had a difficult time. So I thought that was really, really impressive that he's able to do this. And yeah, I really can't wait for that finished project. But that's just another example. Another one, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this was going back a ways. But I believe when you had on Todd Gordon on the show, wasn't that maybe the first time that he announced about his book?
That was at least the first podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think they had even started the publicity. I did that podcast about a month before they started the actual publicity campaign on it. So I was happy with that because Todd and I legit go back, and very few people knew that. Because the tapes I was on, the earliest ECW, Eastern Championship Wrestling show, kind of just went into the ether after they were shown.
Yeah.
And I only did about 6 or 8 shows or something like that and a couple of live events, and that was it. So, but he had great memories like it was yesterday. We were bantering back and forth about doing those early tapes in that little building that we used to do, and then we got a bigger studio, and then the Joey Styles thing about a year and a half later. It was just it was a nice period in my life. I just couldn't continue doing it. It was I didn't think it was any good. Like I said, I've said it a million times. I didn't think as a play-by-play, I didn't think my voice had the right resonance. So I said, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
And then I think he went to a guy named Jay Sully and eventually Joey Styles, and we all know how that worked out.
right.
So
Right.
I'm
Right.
happy. See, I'm happy. I love Joey Styles. He's the greatest guy.
Yeah.
And it's like I got to work with him. He was a good writer too. People don't know that Joey Styles wrote for the London magazines. First thing he ever did as an intern under the name Joey Styles. So
Yeah.
he's
And I
out there
think,
somewhere. I'm hoping he's doing well because he's a wonderful guy.
and one of Joey's last stints in WWE was heading up the website, I believe, right? I could be
I
wrong.
think he was doing something,
Yeah, something
behind the
for the
scenes, yeah.
website.
Even
Um,
after he had stopped doing ECW, their version
right.
of it.
But no, I mean, getting back to you, I mean, those are some of the things that I love about the outdated wrestling hour too. It's just, you get this stuff that you can't hear anywhere else, and that's it's what I kind of I sort of follow that as well. And
Well,
I think
it's a weird thing for me because, my taste in music is weird. I think my taste in wrestlers is weird too because it's like when I had Dr. Jerry Graham Jr. on the show, to me, it was like interviewing Hulk Hogan or Sting. I'm serious
yeah,
because he was one of those unheralded behind the scenes guys who knew the psychology, who knew how to get the best out of every bit of talent he was working with. And Indianapolis WWA was way more successful than anybody gave it credit for. It kept going into the early 90s. And like he said, when they closed up, all the owners walked away with a bag of money.
yeah,
So they didn't go out of business. They chose to stop because they saw the NWA and WWE coming in. But that's only part of how smart this guy is. I mean, he was he took a promotion when first of all, they had David McLean doing announcing. Oh my God. The guy from Glow and now
Oh,
Wow and all that stuff?
I didn't realize that he
Yes,
was working for them.
when excuse me, Sam Menaker left for
Okay.
whatever reason, business was down. They brought in David McLean, and it was just my opinion, it was as horrible as the Glow thing was. Oh, he's got the headline. Oh God. All right. So anyway, after that period, he brings Jerry starts booking, and he brings in Terry Sullivan, who was worked with the Sheik and all those
Right,
guys in
right,
Detroit
right.
for a long time. And Terry has an understated style, almost a Gordon Solie-like style. A little younger than Gordon was, but he had that. But you could tell he's really knowledgeable, and he did ring announcing too. And that's when it took off. And he changed guys from heel to face, and he brought in Scott Steiner. He
Yeah.
brought in the great Wojo. All these are really talented guys. Nobody saw the show because it didn't have wide distribution, but thanks to a guy named Dave Dynasty on YouTube, you can watch these shows. Have you checked any of them out?
I did. I checked
Weren't
some of
they
them out.
weren't they surprisingly good?
They really are, and that again, I would never have known to do that if not for for this podcast.
Well,
But I did.
That's why I wanted Jerry on the show. I wanted to know that somebody out there in his old age was sitting with my laptop on my lap, looking at these YouTube videos and going, I can't believe what I'm watching. This is actually good. Because there were some shows that weren't good, like I was just saying. As time went on, I tried to watch them in sequence. The more I watched, the better it was. And then they kind of stopped. I think just the tapes aren't available, the latest stuff.
Right.
Late Al Snow worked for that promotion and a bunch of other people who, are famous. And I saw some very late tapes that looked like they were kind of falling apart. But then I saw a tape of that same crew working an outdoor show that drew thousands. Maybe
Right.
4,500. I don't care who a promotion is. Drawing 4,500 people is a nice job against the double-headed monster of WCW and WWE. So I got to give them full props. And some of the matches were really good. Some matches were really good. So, and it was kind of like I think that promotion late was kind of like a cross between what the Sheik used to do and, to be honest, a lower budget WWE. Interviews in a studio between the matches and all that stuff, and cut arounds, and Graham's Gallery, we used to lambast people. And, there's another thing about Dr. Graham. Great on the stick. Make you hate
Yes.
him in 5 seconds.
Yeah,
Make you
yeah.
hate him. So it
Absolutely.
was fun. It was just fun. It's great to discover something you haven't seen before. And I'm hoping this podcast is the same thing for a lot of people, that they discover it and they go, I didn't know this, or geez. Like I say, my knowledge base goes back to 1970. It's gotta count for something. I know who Pinky Larsen is. Do you know who Pinky Larsen was?
From
Pinky? No. Pinky Larsen used to set rings up for the old WWF.
Okay.
When somebody didn't show up or something similar of the snowstorm, he would wrestle when there was a snowstorm, when other people couldn't show up. And I saw him work about 5 times. And he came up to my belt buckle. He was a little blonde guy. And he was not good in the ring, but he could take a bump. He could fly out of the ring. And once they put him on TV as Bimbo Larsen, and he just got murdered by some heel, and that was the end of him. So, but I know who Pinky, and he's the first wrestler I talked to. Now you might enjoy this. It's around 75. I'm in Hudson High School watching these matches. And I go, hey, I read that you beat Frankie Williams somewhere or something. He goes, yeah, I murdered that bum. You know how the old school wrestlers would go right into character. Yeah, I murdered that bum. Well, I hadn't heard of you before. What's about it here? Well, for years I wore a hood. I wore a mask. It changes a man to be under. He just went into the whole spiel of the loneliness of the hooded wrestler.
That's great. That's hilarious.
He's trying to put it over me. I'm like 20 years old at this point, and it's like, yeah, sure, fella. But I kept nodding and smiling, but I was talking to a wrestler. And the first wrestler I ever talked to was Pinky Larsen.
There you go. That's a
you gotta
trivia
start,
right there.
You got to start somewhere.
Isn't it funny, though, how like you said, the guy right off the bat was like, I murdered that bum. Isn't it funny how that differs from the wrestling of today? How back then, like, they stayed in character and,
Oh, God, it was great.
Now you're not going to get that much nowadays.
On that same card, Stan the Man Stasiak, the former WWF World Champion, was laying into some ringside fans. Don't call me daddy because I know your mama. And Stan Stasiak was just throwing insults at these people. And his opponent across the ring was SD Jones, right? He keeps insulting it. SD is like, he's like holding his hand over his mouth, trying not to laugh out loud because Stasiak was hilarious. He was getting in personal insults on these people, and the crowd was laughing. And SD Jones, who's supposed to be fighting him, is also busting a gut, trying to hold back the laughs. I never saw a moment like that in any other venue. For some reason, Stasiak just wouldn't quit. There was this group of people in the front row giving him the raspberries, and he was handing it back to them just as bad. Yeah, with a wife like that, I wouldn't be too proud of you. So, one of those just kept going and going and going. Oh boy, those were the days.
I love fan interaction with the wrestlers. That brings up a memory of mine that my wife hates this story. She thinks it's so ridiculous. And this makes me look terrible too. But one of the first dates that I took my wife on when we were dating was to an independent wrestling show at the Queens Elks Lodge in Elmhurst, Queens, New York. And don't ask me why, but I had tickets to that, and I guess I was really trying to woo her, by going to an indie wrestling show. And
I mean, I insist that in years past, fans, and anybody at my age knows this, wrestling used to be female repellent.
Oh my God.
They should have canned that stuff and spray it, and a woman won't get near you for 3 or 4 days afterwards. So please continue.
I just till to this day, I can't believe it happened, but it did. So we went, and again, big spender I am. We had the front row. I probably spent all of. I guess I sprung for the $12 tickets, I guess, that day, and we're sitting in the front row, and I always remember this particular wrestler simply because of what happened. Is that when I'm behaving myself. I'm not a very loud person when I go to shows. I'm not one of these loud mouths that's chanting all the time. Just enjoying it. And I kind of got into it. This guy's coming down, and I don't remember what I said exactly to him, but I just I booed him or something, and I just kind of stood up and gave him the thumbs down in his face. And the wrestler's name was the Kodiak Bear. I'm not sure whatever happened to the Kodiak Bear, but
I saw the Kodiak Bear. Where was this? Yeah,
This
I
was
think he
in
worked.
Queens. Yeah.
I think he worked early ECW. Kodiak Bear did.
He might very well have. I don't know because it's
Eastern Championship.
Eastern Championship. Yeah. And he's walking around ringside and he stops and he gets right into my face to the point where, I mean, like less than a half an inch. And he says something like, uh, sit your ass down, you four-eyed F, before I take your lady, and he's just like right in my face, just screaming at me. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Like I'm standing there and I'm just like loving it. And I start, like, yeah, I'm kind of like all into it, getting my adrenaline going.
Mm-hmm.
And she wasn't my wife then, but she's there and she is mortified. I mean, she is just like, what the hell did you bring me to? Like, what in the hell is this? And he walks away and the whole crowd gets a kick out of it and they laugh and, we sit down and I kind of turned around to her and I say like, wasn't that great? And she just looked at me like I was the biggest dweeb in the world. And how crazy is it that, we've been married for all these years now. This was a very, very long time ago. And I still, I still bring that up, but it's just one, I can't believe I actually took her to this show. It's one thing if you took someone on a date, maybe to like a WWE show or WWF at the
You
time,
took her to an indie show with the Kodiak Bear.
Exactly. And my friends don't let me forget that. I have friends that bring that up to me at times here and there, but hey, it's one of those memories that I'll always have that I still get a kick out of.
Here is a memory from a Madison Square Garden show I covered. And as you know, we had to kind of sneak in. We couldn't really say who we were or anything, or even though an occasional fan would know who I was. But I used to drive in, and there was this great parking lot right across from the back of the garden. I don't even know if it's still there anymore. And I used to do it all the time because nobody knew about it, and it was cheap. So I just preferred to drive in sometimes, especially if I'm bringing somebody. So I park on the second level, take the elevator down, go into the building, right? And then do my PD, and I'm coming back, right? Who gets in the elevator after me but Mr. Fuji, Rick Rude, a referee who I don't remember, and one other wrestler. Now, I'm not going to say anything to these guys, because I'm there in a QT. I can't say, hey, I'm here for PWI, because we were on the outs with WWE at that point.
Right, right.
So the elevator door shuts. Then it opens again. About 15 fans are there going, look, it's Rick Rude over there. Look, there's Fuji. Hey, can I get it? And I hit the button and the doors close. They open it again. Right? They opened it again. Hey, can I? I hit the button again. And I remember Rude going, oh, jeez, we got to get going. So a third time the thing opens, and I go, these guys can't do nothing about it, but I will come out there and beat your ass if you hit that button one more time. They closed it, and we got up to the second floor, and they said, good job, man.
Nice.
So I was a hero because they wanted to get going.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a whole bunch of people. I can't remember if it was one of the front office people. I recognize who it was, but it was like 4 people plus me on this elevator, and
right.
They really want to go because after the third time they were ready to just how are we going to get upstairs?
Right.
Because you had to get up. So I was a minor hero to a bunch of WWE stars on the QT.
Hey, I'll take it. That's awesome.
Yeah. You never know who you're going to run into. I once in Poughkeepsie, New York, ran into Ken Patera, Big John Studd, and Gene Okerlund in a deli. I walk into this deli. It was between work and home. And there's a guy making potato salad with his hands. He was mixing it with his hands. I went, I wouldn't eat this potato salad. Jeez.
With his hands?
Yeah, with his hands. He was mixing potato salad with his hands. But here comes Gene Okerlund. This is before I worked for the wrestling magazine. Gene Okerlund, Patera, and Studd. And I'm like, do I say something? Do I tell him I didn't. But this is what happened. I'm in the candy aisle, right? And Gene Okerlund. He goes, whoa. Oh, man, my stomach. And I went, there's Tums over there, right here. He goes, oh, thank God. Thank you, buddy. And it was like, apparently he ate something to the degree. I'm thinking maybe it was the potato salad. Who knows?
Yeah.
But, when you're younger and you meet pro wrestlers, how do you react? I mean, it's like they must, and it's got to be so hard, especially those days with their heels. You know, I mean, how do you react to fans? It's a tough tightrope because people won't leave you alone. They
Right.
just these days, I think it's worse. I think fans are way more cloying and clingy, and maybe that's why the conventions are so good because you do get that 10 minutes to spend with the wrestler and in a safe environment.
It's always that, it's always that issue or that sort of back and forth that you have when you see a wrestler like that. I mean, I guess for any famous person, but I mean, we're talking about wrestling now, and you see him out in public, and what do? You see him at airport. Do you start speaking with him? Do you leave him alone? If he's at a restaurant, what are the rules, here and there? I mean, for the most part, it doesn't happen all the time. When it's happened, I try to respect their privacy and not really say anything unless I see that they're already talking to people. I might just go over, say hello. But for the most part, if they're in a restaurant, I feel like that's something you kind of don't, you don't kind of, butt in on that. I mean, I know people probably do, but I mean, I always think back, again, getting back to Mick Foley, when WCW first, I believe it was their first or second show at the theater at Madison Square Garden. I guess it was called the Felt Forum at that time, or
Right.
whatever it was called at that time. They ran a small show at the time, and Foley was on the show. And a buddy of mine and me, we were there. And before the show, I can't remember if it was before or after. I think it was before the show. We were hanging outside, whatever that bar is, right outside, right downstairs from the Garden. And we were too young.
Oh yeah, Toots Shores?
That might be it. I can't remember. That
Yeah, I
might
used
be
I
it.
used to go in there. Boy, that was the ultimate old man New York
Yeah,
City bar,
yeah.
right?
It
Right?
looked
Was that
like
the
it.
place? Yeah.
But you have to understand, I was a kid. So, I mean, I was way too young to be in a bar. So me and my buddy are just standing. I've never been in a bar at that point in my life. So we're just kind of like standing outside, and we could see right through the door. We see Foley at the bar, and he's talking to a friend of his, whatever, and he's just having a drink or whatever he's doing. And I'm just telling my friend, I'm like, oh man, I really want to meet, Cactus, whatever. I guess he was Cactus Chuck. And I really want to meet him. And he's like, what are we going to do? We can't go in there. It's a bar, what are we going to do? And I just said, finally, I was like, Joe, my friend's name is Joe too. I said, we got to do it. Let's just go in. And the door opened. We both walked in, and we just went right up to him, and we just said, hello, sir, we were big fans. And we just talked to him. He was obviously, as you could probably tell, what a nice guy he is, but he was so nice to us. And he gave us he autographed our whatever we had, our magazine that we had. And, we hung out a few times. We hung out for a few minutes. And then I remember at one point we looked over, and the bartender was just kind of looking at us, giving us the eye or whatever. And we just decided, you know what? I think it's time we leave. I think we've worn out our welcome. I think we should appreciate that we got this much time with him. We spoke to him for a few minutes, got his autograph, walked out, and we were happy, So, I mean, things like that, you do. But, like, again, don't you think that, like, you always have to say to yourself, like, do you really want to bother the guy? You have to kind of weigh the pros and cons.
When I was a musician, I would introduce myself to other musicians because we're in a musician's milieu in a club or something like Buddy Guy. I would walk up to. One time we had a nice long conversation because I was in his club and I was a blues musician and blah blah blah. So we had something in common. However, other celebrities I leave alone, and here's why. I want to tell this story. I shouldn't tell this story. My favorite baseball player growing up was the late Ed Kranepool, who died last year.
Yep.
And I'm in a pizzeria in Long Island, in the New Hyde Park area. And we're sitting there, and we're having our slices or whatever we're eating. And here comes Ed Kranepool and his wife, because they lived on Long Island for the longest time. And they're just ordering their food and sitting down. And I said, no, I'm not. I had met him in the past. I said, I'm not going to bother him. I'm not bothering anybody that's eating. However, to my left, I make the mistake of making a conversation with a fellow who was there with his wife or his significant other. He's wearing a Yankee hat and jacket. And I said, you're a baseball fan. You know who that is? He goes, no. I go, this Ed Kranepool. He played for the Mets for 17 years. He's a first baseman back from 62 on. Well, the guy erupts. Hey, it's Ed Kranepool. He's a great first baseman.
Blew his cover.
Ooh, oh God. He goes up to the table where the guy is, and I'm doing one of those. And
Yeah.
I remember Kranepool signed his paper bag. He had a paper bag with him. He signed his paper bag, and he the guy, I didn't know he was going to like take off mentally the way he did. He was just like, I don't want to say anything about his persona, the fan, but
Right, right, right.
I never dreamed that another adult would go, look over there. I mean, yelling. And I'm like, oh God, I just ruined a Krampel's pizza pie.
Yeah,
I didn't want to do that. I just was pointing him out. So from that point on, I ain't talking to nobody I don't know. Thank you and good night,
yeah,
everybody. No, no,
yeah.
no, but seriously, you know what I mean? I don't want to pester just because they're famous. At that point, Krampel's like anybody else. He goes to
Right.
and probably doesn't even get recognized. He hadn't played for 30 years or something like that. So you know what I mean? When
What was
you're older,
Krampel's reaction in that instance?
he was a perfect gentleman to the guy.
Oh, okay, cool.
Signed his paper bag and
Yeah, yeah.
talked to him for a moment or two. I remember Krampel told the guy, he goes, "You're wearing the wrong uniform, kid," because he had a Yankee garb on. But
Right, right, right.
but I had met Krampel many times as a sports writer, so it was like I didn't want to bother him. He wouldn't know me, Sports athletes talk to everybody. I guarantee you. It's like my story about naming the split-legged moose. There's no way Rob Van Dam remembers.
Right,
There's
right.
no way. There's no way. He's not going to remember that. So I'm not going to make a big to-do about it, although it was a nice memory. And sitting at TV and hearing Jim Ross say those words. I mean, that means I helped the industry that much. I'm showing my pinky finger, folks. I had a little bit of a tiny bit of an influence while I was there, and that made me feel good.
I mean, I know you've told that story before. I still think it's a very cool story. I mean, the moonsaults for a while there. I know this is a variation of it, but I mean, that move in general was like so hot
It was hot.
for
It was
a while
unbelievable.
because everyone had never seen anything like it before, and that actually just sort of like shook my memory a bit. Like I actually used to write for a newsletter back in the day called the Moonsault Press. And believe it or not, it was actually by a guy named Dave Doyle. He ran the newsletter, and he went on to, this was when we were both I guess we were both in college, and he actually went on, this guy Dave, to head up the MMA division of Yahoo Sports. He worked for Sports Illustrated, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, the Boston Globe. He had a very nice career. I still keep in touch with him every once in a while, but that actually just opened up my brain for a second when you mentioned that, the moonsault. It's funny how that happens, but it's
at that point, those type of moves were rare. I was just getting over Scott Steiner's Frankensteiner, which I thought was just the most magical thing I'd ever seen at that point. That move was phenomenal. Particularly a guy that big and strong pulling that off.
Exactly.
He didn't look like the type. You would figure a Bobby Eaton would do that or something like that.
To this day, that move actually,
it's phenomenal.
It shocks me. Yeah, when I see it in old clips and everything, it's almost like it almost looks like impossible to be able to do. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm in Memphis, and I see Van Dam do this split-legged moonsault, and I went, look how easy he made it. Like, he popped right up after doing it. I'm like, I've never seen anything like it. So I came back to the office after the trip was over, and I said, Stu Sachs, I want to do Rob Stakowski. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah.
And I believe that was some of the earliest press he got, and I hope he enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to him on the phone when I called him back. Him and Sabu were really cool when I met him. They were together because they were both trained by the Sheik. Sheik sent them to Memphis so they can enjoy those $50 payoffs or whatever they were, But I met them both when they were just cutting their teeth, and it's one of the most. Another reason why that week in Memphis is the most fun I think I ever had in wrestling, because it's like, good gravy, man. On the Channel 5 show, Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, Dave Brown, Michael St. John, Tojo Yamamoto, Eric Embry.
Yeah.
Go down the line, the dirty white boy, the dirty white girl, everybody who was a Memphis regular, Doug Gilbert. I mean, just keep going. Great memories. Jeff Jarrett.
Yep.
Met Jarrett. We talked for a while. Robert Fuller. I mean, come on. And I still consider the Memphis weekly TV show to be my all-time favorite, even though I caught it late in life. I don't care. I just thought the thing had it going on. Those fans cared in Memphis. They cared about everything. They cared about Andy Kaufman feud. I mean, what a territory that was. My favorite territory. I'm even passing even though I grew up on WWF, Memphis is my favorite of all time. And I was a full-grown adult watching it and knew the business.
Yeah.
I still loved it.
it's I know you've said that many times, and I said it's always interesting what resonates with people. I mean, it's most of the time it's going to be something that they grew up with, the nostalgia factor. But it is interesting that you sort of gravitate towards that, like you said, over the more well-known WWF or the WWF or
Well,
NWA or anything like that.
being this was outdated, let's take it back. This is 1991, all right? The homogenized WWE was horrible. WWF at that point, they had, Papa Shango
Mm,
and all this other stuff, and it was just, here's your ice cream bars and all. I had lost my taste for my own home federation greatly. So then
yeah.
tried getting into NWA, and I like the NWA a lot, and I still think to this day that if they had continued to be the NWA, they'd still be around.
Mhm.
They should have remained their own flavor instead of trying to emulate what the WWF was doing in the early '90s. Nobody could ever do that again. Stick with what made you, stick with what brought you to the dance. You were still drawing. It's when they try to soft soap it and create characters that they got into
Yes.
trouble, right? So
But
I'm totally dis disenamored. My love is I'm in a wrestling magazine. It's like when I got a job as a record store manager years before that. Oh boy, I'm a rock and roller. I'm managing a record store, and here comes Depeche Mode. That's not rock and roll. Not the way I grew up on it.
yeah,
Where's
yeah,
all my bands? They all broke up. So now it's like Men Without Hats and Depeche Mode. I'm like, what happened? Right? So 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 now years later, I'm in the wrestling business and I'm watching stuff I don't like, but I turn on Memphis and I loved it. It still had the flavor. Maybe because the first wrestling show I ever saw, which was the old NWF with Johnny Powers, that was the studio show too. So the intimacy of that I think grabbed me at first. The secondly, I saw how enthusiastic the fans were. And then I saw the clips from the Memphis Coliseum or the Mid-South Coliseum, excuse me. And it was like, wow, what action this is. It's all rough and tumble stuff. I loved it, still do to this day. If I'm flipping around on YouTube and I see a card from Memphis, I will watch the whole thing. I just can't get enough of that stuff.
well, that's the same experience for a lot of generations of wrestlers, like of wrestling fans. I think you mentioned the cartoonish aspect of WWF at that time, but I mean, let's be honest, isn't that one of the reasons why the original ECW struck a chord with so many people? I mean,
Mhm.
when that got big in what, like 94, 95, 96, whenever those big years were for them. I mean, it was because people were kind of tired of seeing Duke the Dumpster Drosy and
Yeah.
Sparky
Lucky
Plug and
plug. Yeah. Yeah.
guys, so they want an alternative. And Paul Heyman has gone on record as, sort of using the analogy of in the music industry of WWF at that time was sort of like the hair metal at the time. It was your Poison and your Def Leppard and your Motley Crue. And hey, look, we've done a show on rock and roll placements. I make no bones about my love for those bands. So, full disclosure here. But I will say that at that time, those bands were on the way out. Nobody wanted to see that anymore. And he said ECW was basically the grunge movement. It was Pearl Jam, Nirvana,
Mhm.
Soundgarden,
It's a
Pilots,
good comparison.
that's what they needed, and I think it's the same thing.
I will say this, even when I was working with Todd at Eastern Championship Wrestling, I was at their first card at Michael Jack's bar in Philadelphia. Yeah, I'm thinking that's the venue. If I'm wrong, Todd can correct me, but it was a small bar. Nice bar, but a small bar. I saw people in that crowd that showed up who used to go to Tri-State in the front row. The same guys in the same spot. And when I saw them there, I'm thinking, this is gonna work. Because, say what you want about Joe Goodhart, Tri-State Wrestling, the precursor to ECW, was that same hard-hitting flavor, and it was an answer to what WWE was doing at that point. Here's your ice cream bar, kids. It was the exact opposite. It was, guys hitting each other with beer cases and ripping the bar apart, and it had that hard-hitting. And Todd always said he wanted to bring Memphis-style wrestling to the East Coast, and he did.
Yep.
Jackpot. I mean, it's a funny thing, wrestling. Now, even with Heyman there, and even with Eddie Gilbert there previous to him, I don't know if they ever really made that much money because The problem with a lot of indies is you have to they felt they needed big names to draw, but the big names were so expensive there wasn't any money left over at the end of the night.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I remember once they brought Road Warrior Hawk into an ECW card, early one. I think Heyman was booking at that point. And I'm thinking, God, how much did it cost them to bring him in there? So, but you take chances. But they were drawing. There's the ECW arena, 2300 arena now. They were drawing. I mean, but it's a hard road to hoe. But yeah, I always got the feeling the ECW was going to work one way or another. And in many ways, it really did. It was really influential, obviously. And nobody who ever tried to emulate was as good, not even close. That stuff out in California, I don't even want to name the federation, was garbage. But at least, and people forget the scientific matches they had in ECW.
Yes.
Guerrero and Jericho, and just go down the list of all the people who were there. Pillman.
I mean,
just
remember those Dean
Austin.
Malenko, Eddie Guerrero matches were incredible.
Yeah, people forget that stuff. People forget in Tri-State they had Japanese Star against Owen Hart, who rarely appeared in the United States at that point.
Right.
So, no, that's why to this day, I think we should sit here now. I'm not criticizing anybody, but I think Philadelphia is the wrestling capital of the United States, because if there's a show at 2300 Arena, it's going to sell. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter what it is. People go. They've seen MLW. Joe Goodhart's doing a card there. That's going to be a big coin. They've had other promotions going in and out of there, and they always drew. I went to a convention there, drew like crazy. So it's like, I can't think of another town. And on WrestleMania weekend, they had like 3 other cards going on, plus a convention, and it was big box office everywhere you went. So, and that's outside of the realm of the WWE. So Philadelphia is a wrestling town, no question.
For sure. It's been a while since I've been out to Philly, but nothing but great memories of going to the ECW arena.
Something. I gotta go. I'm going to in May. I'm going to Goodhart's thing. Maybe you can come with me. If you've never been, I'm going there and doing an appearance there, and maybe you'd want to come along, because it's like, I'm going to see a lot of people I haven't seen in 35 years or 40 years or whatever it's been. That was the earliest, precursor to ECW, and a lot of those guys ended up working in ECW. And I guess they're putting me on what Joe referred to as podcast row or something. I'll be in a certain section because there's a convention in the daytime, and then at night there's a card.
Yeah, right.
So I'll see if I can finagle something for you, but that would be fun if we could do that.
Yeah.
So here you are, Mr. Co-host. Let's talk about something current before we say goodbye to everybody. I am excited over, people are going to be shocked, Ricky Starks, who I used to watch in the good version of Corgan's NWA, along with Eli Drake, who is now LA Knight. And I thought those two guys were both cool, and now they're both in WWE, and I think Ricky Starks is going to do very well. What do you think?
Agree 100%. Always been a Ricky Starks fan from his beginnings in the NWA to his time in AEW. I was actually watching NXT live when Starks debuted, which I really don't do a lot. Usually I'll watch it on the next day, but so I was as surprised as anybody. In fact, there's even a little footage of, I don't know if you saw, The Undertaker was on Bully Ray's podcast while NXT was live on Tuesday night, and he had a TV on while he was doing the podcast. And I guess Bully Ray asked Taker a question, and Taker kind of like wasn't responsive. And he's like, "What's going on?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just watching NXT here. It looks like Ricky Starks is there." So he kind of got to see the Undertaker's live reaction while it happened.
Holy smokes.
And he had a lot of nice things to say about him. I guess I might be, I believe Taker said that when that Starks helped train Michelle McCool to get her back into ring shape for a few years ago when she did the Royal Rumble or something like this. It was something to the effect of, obviously Undertaker's married to Michelle McCool, that that she needed to get some ring rust out of the way. And I believe for whatever reason, he knew Starks, he knew him from the gym, whatever, and Starks went ahead and did that. So he had a lot of nice things to say about him. But anyway, I will say that I've always been a big fan of his. I was a huge supporter of his in AEW. And to this day, I'm shocked that Tony Khan let him go. And we still don't know the exact reason, right? We don't know because I know that it's been said that it's sort of they don't talk about it. Tony Khan said, "Oh, there was an issue there," but much like the Cody Rhodes exit from AEW, where it's supposedly unspoken, no one's ever going to talk about it for whatever reason. Khan just has not mentioned what the reason is, but I think he dropped the ball there. Absolutely. I think Ricky Starks is a great talent. I think he's great on the mic. He's a great wrestler. So
yeah,
I think he's going to do well in WWE or NXT.
I think he's kind of original. He's really good on the stick, and he could be a face. He could be heel. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He'll go over either way. I can picture him wrestle. Think about this. Close your eyes and imagine Ricky Starks versus CM Punk.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Or even Ricky Starks versus, I dare say, Cody Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm trying to match him up size-wise.
Right.
Or Seth Rollins. Does that sound good?
I think it's money. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Give him 6 months. They're going to start him on NXT, I guess. But you know what? If it was me, I would have put him on the main roster right away. But that's just me.
I go back and forth on that. I don't know. I at first thought the same thing, but now that I think about it, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of him starting on NXT because it gives them some buzz. I mean, let's be honest. It's obviously NXT is not drawing the same crowds as Raw or SmackDown. So I feel like it gives that brand some buzz. It was a shock. Nobody expected it. And I mean, we all know he's going to end up on the main roster. So it's just a matter of time. So I almost feel like it's kind of cool. And I know they have a big show coming up, I believe this Saturday or Sunday, the Vengeance Day. So I think I would assume he's going to be there. But I mean, I just think it kind of creates some buzz for that brand. And hey, look, I'm sure Shawn Michaels is happy about it since he's all about NXT and he's running that show. So I think he's happy to have a talent like that to book now.
I absolutely agree. So good luck, Ricky Starks. I think that's a great signing. And like I said, Triple H is the Lorne Michaels of wrestling.
Yeah.
When you see a comedian on SNL, they're going to be funny. And now, the last 2 years, when you see a wrestler in WWE, they earn their spot. They are good enough to be there. You couldn't always say that years ago. Now you can say it for sure. He knows how to pick them. So that's pretty cool. So, just to let the audience know how we're going to format this show at the beginning of every show, you're going to hear Joe and I kibitz. We're going to shoot the breeze, talk about new things, old things, and stuff. And starting with next week's show, we already have an interview in the can with John McCall from Wrestle Talk with Mayor McCall and his co-host Willie B. And we're going to talk about Memphis a little bit, and then we'll do the interview with those guys. And Joe will be part of every show moving forward. And I hope you enjoyed this show. Joe, it was great to have you here. It's our first time to shoot the breeze. I know we're going to argue vehemently in the future. No, I don't mean that. But no. You know what? We're gonna butt heads. We're gonna have differences of opinion. He likes AEW. Mr. Puccio does. I find it not to my liking. I get insulted every time I watch an episode, but that's just me. I'm 106 years old. I watched Pinky Larsen. Right? Maybe it's going to take a while for me to warm up to, I don't know, the Young Bucks. I don't know. Although Pinky was taller than the Young Bucks.
Bob, give me 6 months. In 6 months, you'll be an AEW supporter.
Get out.
Hey, you never know.
No, I mean, get out. Get away from. No, I'm just kidding.
The rest of this, come on.
No. So anyway, that's this week's Outdated Entertainment Hour, which is both this podcast and the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Did I say entertainment?
You did.
I keep conflating the two.
Oh, wrestling is entertainment. That's okay.
Here comes the break again. The Outdated Wrestling Hour and the Outdated Entertainment Hour are productions of Bob Smith Podcasts. The Outdated Wrestling Hour is part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Write to us at outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith singing with BB King. You can also find me as Outdated Bob on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. You tried Blue Sky yet?
I tried it briefly, but I haven't been back since. I believe I have a count on there. Yeah.
Jump on. They're up to like 40 million people now. It's crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
Growing all the time. Who else? I just want to say our website is outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where you can hear every episode free of charge. We will never Patreon you for listening to old shows. We just welcome every listen that you make. You can also join our Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, where for a nominal fee, you can perpetuate the ongoing adventures of both of our podcasts and get to know us a little better in that regard. Once in a while, we do have a Zoom meeting where you're going to have to come to a Zoom meeting, Joe, and meet some of our fan club members. And I usually give away a prize or two. Worthless garbage prizes, but I give them away nonetheless. So that's basically it. So this is the first time I have ever done a podcast where I didn't cut it. Like, we started the show and this is the end of the show, and I didn't have to like make chunks out of it. So I appreciate your being here. And Joe, you're a great guy. I'm so happy we got to know each other. In the future, let's do a face-to-face podcast because I've got the equipment for that. We're literally about 5 miles away from each other right now as we talk to each other from where I do our podcast studio here. And you could come in if you ever have time, and we could do it face to face, which would probably sound great, to be honest with you.
Absolutely, that sounds like a lot of fun, and I'd definitely be open to that. Yeah.
So anyway, look for Joe every week. Look for me every week, provided I'm still breathing. The way things are going, it's been between my shoot gig and my 2 podcasts and other advocations, I am starting to feel it. I'm getting the old man stuff. Like like when I get out of the car after I've been driving too long, the knees are like, hi. And my lower back says, you shouldn't have sat in that position this long. This has never happened before. And if you know anything about being my age, folks, I'll leave you with this bit of advice. If you make it to my age as a man, when you got to pee, you got to pee. That's another difference from being a young punk like you and an old fart like me, Puccio. I mean, I have reached the point now where you got to find a restroom right away. There's no waiting. You got to go. I remember driving from New York City to Baltimore and say, I'll do it when I get to Baltimore. No, this is not fun, Joe.
I know I'm a few years younger than you, but I'm telling you, I already know what you mean.
Do you really? Okay.
I do.
Oh gosh, no, I don't need any of those products. I'm not old enough to need the products, if you know what I'm talking about. Thank goodness. But I'm so old, Joe, that when I use just for a minute lasts just an hour. That's how old I am. When I go to the doctor, he cuts my leg off and counts the rings. That's how old I am. Joe, I'm so old, there are younger faces on the coins in my pocket. That's how old I am. Joe, I'm so old, my social security number is 17. That's how old I am. He's not laughing.
That's pretty old, Bob.
Have I told? These are all jokes. Okay, all right. So before I have to go Betty bye and get a nap in, this is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. We're so glad, Joe and I are so glad that you came out and listened tonight. And we will see you next week when we talk about Memphis with Mayor McCall and Willie B and Joe Puccio. We'll see you next time. And like I say at the end of every one of these shows, quoting another old timer, Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers. Peace and love. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with the elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today.